This one also went into the drawer, I have to say, and it sat in a drawer for 3 years. Hi, I'm Jennifer Trevelyan. I am the author of A Beautiful Family, which is being published by Allen and Unwin, and it's coming out 3rd of June. I would sort of call it a coming-of-age mystery novel. It's set in 1985 on the Kapiti coast of New Zealand, where I spent my summers as a child. It follows a 10-year-old narrator who meets a boy on the beach. They become friends and decide to try to solve a local mystery. Closer to home, her family is falling apart, and she's the only one who's noticed that there's a man next door who is watching everything they do. So it's atmospheric and suspenseful, and it hopefully takes you right back to your childhood summers. I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and I think that I spent a lot of my time observing as the youngest, observing what I was about to become, maybe, as I watched my sisters go into adulthood. And I remember that just so vividly, and how the relationship changed. I mean, we were all really quite well-behaved girls, but still, it's sometimes a bit shocking to watch your sisters go through that change from where you're all really kids and you're excited about Christmas and you love swimming and you're hanging out together all the time, and then slowly watching them pull away, and it's a kind of grief that you go through and a loneliness that you're the last one left. So I really tapped into that. The book starts with a scene in a car, and I could vividly recall family road trips where, I love my sisters, but I didn't want any part of my body to touch any part of their body, because you're just in that, it's just claustrophobia, and you're trying to become your own person and rubbing each other up the wrong way. So I tried to capture that. I did make the relationship a bit more fraught than probably mine was with my sisters, but it's a story and it's got to be interesting. It's my debut novel, but it's not the first novel I've written. So I spent about 10 years seriously trying to become a writer, writing in cafes before work. I was part-time working, and I'm a mum. And I wrote maybe, I think it was 4 novels before this, which went into a drawer, because I was teaching myself how to write a novel, and it's hard, and I knew I wasn't quite there yet. And it's personally, I'd prefer to start a new, fresh idea than sort of work on something for years and years and years. This one also went into the drawer, I have to say, and it sat in a drawer for 3 years. And I moved on, and I think I just got a bit too close to it and lost perspective on whether it was good. I did an MA. After writing this novel, I did an MA, and that kind of taught me to take myself a little bit more seriously as a writer, and to trust the work and to value it. So when I came out of the MA, I thought, of all the things I had written, I knew this was the best. So I pulled it out of the drawer, and I kind of forced myself to maybe be a bit less attached to it and send it out and let someone else decide if it was good. When you look back at your life, and some memories you're not sure if they're real, or if you imagine them, they're highly subjective. Even your sister who was in that car with you might have a completely different recollection of events. I'm quite fascinated by that. I always have been. I love reading, for example, biographies where you get all these different views of the same person. And I kind of wanted to do that within this book. And so nothing that the narrator describes is quite sort of nailed down. And I think the reader gets that feeling, and I also thought, because it is quite a simple story, really, I thought, where will the tension come from? And I thought the tension would come from the reader knowing more than the narrator does. And I thought that was just a really interesting thing to explore, and lots of fun. I think that honesty is very relatable and attractive in a character. So even if a character is a bad person, if they're being really honest and vulnerable with the reader will probably connect to them. So I tend to think of it that way rather than their actions and their behaviours. And I actually really enjoy writing and reading complicated characters who don't always behave well. My narrator in this book does something partway through the book which is a bit not so nice, and but she's very honest about it, and I think that brings the reader on board. I think I tend to probably sometimes take things a little too far and then I have to pull them back. That's probably better than having to, make things bigger. It's easier to make things a little smaller. When the book went to my agent, she thought that the sisters were too horrible to each other, particularly thought the older sister was just appalling. It was so funny. I thought, gosh, she must have had really nice sisters growing up. So I pulled the older sister back just a tad. And that was probably me just, you're not always sure if the message is getting through. So you can soften things, but that's second, third, fourth draft. First draft, I think just write it as honestly as you can. For a long time, I was writing for about an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half each morning before work in a cafe. And I sort of learned to write that way. So it's become a bit of a habit to write in these shorter bursts. But now I'm very lucky I have all day if I wish. But I still get up crack of dawn and go off and do a couple of hours and then take a break. I have kids and all of that stuff you have to do. And then I have a second session in the afternoon in a cafe because I like that buzz, and writing is very lonely. I can't write at home. I don't know why. I've never been able to write at home. I have to get out away from the domestic to sort of get into my world. So in the morning I'm in a little office, in the afternoon I'm in a cafe, and that's working really well for me at the moment, but who knows, it might change. I don't think I'll ever be one of those writers that can sit down and write for 5 or 6 hours at a time. For me, it's almost like a performance. I feel like I'm improvising on a stage, and so it's quite exhausting. And you can only do it for so long, and then you need a little break. And I usually read, maybe just read the newspaper or read a short story or something to kind of relax after a writing session. What was the best writing advice that you've been given? Oh my gosh. I've had so much writing advice. Because I've always wanted to be a writer, I have devoured interviews with authors for as long as I can remember. One of my favourite writers is Elizabeth Strout, and I really identify with her because she took a little bit longer to come to it, and she was a mother and a little bit older when she was first published. And she said, you have to be ruthless to be a writer. You have to really ring fence your writing time. You can't let anything else knock it off. And there are a lot of things competing for your time, but you have to be ruthless. You have to devote yourself to the novel. The novel should feel like an obsession, I think. And I think she really, I think that's what she was saying. It should feel like something you cannot put aside for a minute. I might only spend 4 hours total writing, but it is 24 hours a day. It's always in my head. You're like living in this other world, which is what is so fun about it. I think the creative process will always be a really personal thing, and it's different for everybody, but I hope people are still reading novels and learning about other lives that way, and that artists can still find the time and the space to write. I think it has got a little bit scarier to be published because it's so, it can be quite toxic out there in the social media sphere, and it's a little bit scary, but I hope people still have the courage to do it, and they can still say whatever they want to say in the way they want to say it. My mother says I was writing all the time. I don't actually remember that. I remember drawing all the time. I loved drawing. I do remember a story I wrote when I was about 11 or 12, and it was a horror story. I did it for school. I don't know what. Well, actually, I'm not surprised it was horror because my mind always goes to dark places. And I remember the title. It wasn't terribly original. It was called Silent Maneuvers in the Dark. And it was about a babysitter. Yeah, but this was before like Scream or anything, but it was about a babysitter who was babysitting and, hears noises in the house. And I loved writing it. And yeah, I handed it in and I had this teacher, if you're out there, Mr. Tyther, Jim Tyther. He gave me a really great mark, but I remember when he handed it back to me, he said, "You're going to be an author when you grow up." And at that stage, I was like, because I thought it sounded really boring. I wanted to be like a movie star or something at that point. But he was right, and that was hugely encouraging, and I've never forgotten that. When I'm writing a novel, I find it quite hard to read other novels, because I think you're trying to protect that voice that you're in. You don't want anything to knock it out of your head. So I tend to reread a lot of novels that I'm familiar with, and I'll go back to things that inspire me. And I might just pick up a novel and reread a chapter that I remember as being great. And I'm always trying to analyze how they've made that chapter so great. So while I'm writing, the reading is almost a tool. And then when I'm giving myself a break, like I am this week, for example, I can just read something for fun. And I have a lot of female authors that I adore. I've just read the latest Anne Tyler. I love, as I mentioned, Elizabeth Strout. I love Donna Tartt. One of my earliest, the book that probably made me want to be an author was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I've always gone slightly toward the Gothic. I do want to read more contemporary stuff, but as I say, it tends to sort of, I don't want it to get in my head and affect what I'm trying to do, because you just have to do what you want to do. And sometimes when you read something that's just come out and maybe it's a big hit, you sort of think, oh, maybe I should be doing this, or you start comparing yourself in unhealthy ways. Right now, I'm working on what I hope will be my next book. It's been a really different experience, as you can imagine, because I'm used to writing basically into a void, sort of dancing in the dark, and now I have a certain amount of expectation and I know who my first readers are going to be, and that's a very different experience. So I'm trying to sort of enjoy that, and I am, but it is different. I'm just really looking forward to hopefully turning this into a long-term career and just writing lots of books and exploring lots of different voices. I do want to make this my life because I love it. Thank you. Thank you very much.